Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Ebby, and this is Jambalaya Podcast. I invite you to come stir the pot with me as we get into a wide range of topics. Yes, indeed. Where you at? Hey everybody, it's Ebby, Jambalaya Talks, and I wanted to drop a video for you guys today, kind of talking about some things that are happening in the news, but maybe in a different way, not kind of segmenting them, but more addressing them from a aerial perspective, looking down on it. Let's pretend that we're in a drone and we're all kind of looking at what's happening down beneath us. When you're actually in the action, you only have your peripheral view, you have your front view, and you can look behind you. But when you have an aerial view, you can look down and the visuals are going to be a lot different. If you've ever seen a video taken by drone capture, it's amazing because you have a large landscape of what's going on down below. You can see many more things outwardly and not just to the left or right of you. And the way that I'm going to do this, and this is podcast number 6, and the title of this is going to be U.S. Government, Narcissistic and Inhumane. I want to give a shout out to my cousin who gave me this title because I was looking for a title to kind of summarize what I was trying to talk about, and the title that I had was way too long. So thank you, cousin. So I have a question. What are the symptoms of a society that has been affected by narcissistic abuse? We could look at, let's say, pop culture. Celebrities preening at the red carpet when you and I go to a store and the shelves are kind of bare. That is maybe one example because we see people living a certain way. And this isn't about them having more than us because that exists in every society. And if you work for your money, you should enjoy your money. This is more talking about how people have a kind of elitist view of themselves, and therefore they think that this enables them to determine what everybody else's life should look like. That is a feature of a narcissist. We could also look at and talk about identity politics and how the powers that be use old wounds to create new pains, if you will, to create more divisiveness and hatred. Because in order to try to use immutable characteristics and use history and sometimes perverted views of history and to create some type of calamity out of that, I would argue has to be a narcissistic trait because you, the narcissist, stands to benefit, right? And we're going to get to who the narcissist is in the situation. But I could definitely use that because I can see where as groups of people are beginning to fight and have infighting amongst themselves, there are people that are benefiting financially, politically, and they kind of stoke the fires because of this benefit. The people, remember, front, back, and side view in the fight, can't see, or they're not actively thinking about why this is constantly coming up, the identity politics, and how they play a part in that and how they're not gaining anything. In fact, it's actually costing them, but someone is gaining. Well, people have talked about pop culture and people have talked about race almost ad nauseum and sometimes with not really great outcomes. So I don't really want to segment the topics because there's too many of them to cover. And in later podcasts, I will try to break down how this narcissism is affecting us and how it's effective. But I first want to kind of give you guys a good understanding of what narcissism is. Now, some of you may know what a narcissist is. You may have even been in a relationship with one. But what if I told you that the narcissist in this situation is the government, right? It's not an individual this time. And in order for you guys to be able to kind of go on this journey with me and understand the different descriptors, I'm only going to use 3 out of the 15 because they're very extensive, the descriptions. But in order for you to be able to follow along with me, I need to maybe parse out what a narcissist actually is. So I found this article. It was really great, and I kind of took some notes from it to reference it because I wanted to be able to explain this and make it very clear. This is an article by Nafeesh Allen, who's a PhD, and they also have a licensed psychotherapist named Carrie Mead, who goes on to explain the telltale signs of narcissistic abuse. But first, let me just give a descriptor. So at its core, narcissism is selfishness and entitlement taken too far. Narcissists stretch the boundaries of self-confidence to embody a superiority complex and exhibit a lack of empathy toward others. Living with or loving a person who has narcissistic traits is no easy feat. In fact, due to narcissists' manipulative behaviors, it may be months or even years before a partner realizes, we're the partner, that something is truly wrong. By then, they may have normalized narcissistic abuse and have no clue how to recover. So, according to Mead, it typically looks like the abuse. One partner manipulating the other for personal gain. So if in this scenario that I'm painting, the narcissist in relationship with us is the government, I don't think I have to tell you that we've been living through for the past couple of years a situation where they stand to gain, right? They stand to gain control. They've been gaining control for quite some time. And they've been doing it in a myriad of ways. Covertly in some situations, very in our face in others. And the reason why this disturbs me is because I see the effects in real time. And I'm sure some of you do too. No different than if you were in a relationship with someone who was a narcissist. You know, the interesting thing about narcissism is that they typically don't get help because of the obvious issue with pride, right? Usually a narcissist kind of deals with things from the perspective that everyone else and everything else is the problem, right? And the person who's involved with the narcissist doesn't know they're with a narcissist. They may not even have heard the term, but they know that something's off after a while because there is a modus operandi that the narcissist works from. So with that, let me just give you a couple of things that the psychotherapist says to kind of look out for. First, she says, it is a form of dealing with another person where one demeans and controls them. Okay, so remember, they're manipulating them for personal gain, and then they demean and control them. I want you to keep those two thoughts in your mind as I go through this. All right, so when this happens repeatedly, the victim, us, begins to question their own self-worth, intuition, and reality. In Mead's experience, abusers who alienate victims from friends and family do so that the victim feels isolated, alone, and afraid. Okay, so just to kind of capture the past couple of years, what do you notice has been the tactic used and then the outcome? The tactic used has been, don't do this, do this. And if you do what I say, you'll get rewards. If you don't do it, you're going to be punished. The punishment, in most cases, for most of us, was isolation from family, from friends, right? We also didn't get to partake, if you will, in a lot of things, a lot of events. And the outcome was depression for some, weight gain and chronic overeating for others, a lot of mental anguish, not knowing how to even function. I've heard stories of people saying, you know, when I went back to work, or I could go and, be free to engage with others in public, I didn't even know how to have a conversation, which I find really sad because these are some of the most basic aspects of a community thriving, is people engaging with one another. I remember when maybe a year into us having to put the face diaper on, I noticed very quickly how people stopped even looking each other in the eye when you would cross them in the store. People that, you may or may not have known, but they'd speak and greet you like people typically do when they're crossing each other's paths. And at this junction, I noticed that it didn't take very long for people to just kind of acquiesce, not just physically, but there was a mental submission where you no longer could acknowledge your neighbor or a person crossing your path because you were to see them as a danger and even yourself as a potential danger. So the narcissistic abuse actually worked here because we were isolated and we were trained to not trust others. But I'll get to that some more later. All right. The other thing that she mentions is that some say that narcissism can be easiest to identify in people with power and money. Why? Because people with power and money can isolate themselves from negative criticism, right? And if you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you'll notice that the minute you call them out for something they do, they kind of do one or two things. They have a couple of things in their wheelhouse. One, they become extremely defensive. And then they become attacking. And then after they become attacking, then they begin to play the victim. They act like a wounded animal. So you find yourself, if you're, sensitive and compassionate, which is what they usually play on, you find yourself kind of protecting them, though you were addressing their wrongdoing. You actually end up kind of like protecting them from the wrong of you confronting them, which is really ridiculous. And I just want you to kind of keep this in mind when I'm talking about the government, okay? And how there have been people that will defend government entities, not knowing them. And I'm not talking about supporting someone because of their policies. I mean, actually defending the person as though they know them, becoming irate with you, right, or myself, and engaging in a type of argument or anger towards you because of you making, a judgment call on some behavior you see that's wrong, right? So this is a person that has been abused by a narcissist, which is the government, and they're not aware of it. All right. And then she goes on to say that they minimize contact with anyone who is giving them negative or critical feedback. And this is true because the interesting thing is when you defend the narcissist who is abusing you, you actually kind of become an abuser yourself. People who you trusted their outlook, their opinion, their perspective, you may have engaged, with them, joined them in certain outings, or you hung out with them, or they were friends and family, whatever the case may be. When the narcissist gets a hold of you, instead of you not trusting them, they get you to not trust people you've trusted always. And that isolation factor is there. You are made to believe that they really do have your best interest at heart, and everybody else is the problem. Really sad, actually. All right, so I've got 3 warning signs to look out for. And like I said, this is a 3 out of the 14, 15 because they're so extensive. I had to kind of break them down and modify them for my use. So number 1, these are some special tactics that narcissists might use to control their victim. Remember, we're the victim. The government is the narcissist. The order and magnitude of these behaviors can vary based on how far the abuser is willing to go to get what they want, just like anyone else, right? I usually use children as an example, not of narcissists, but of people who will use any situation to kind of cater to their needs. And this is, natural to children, right? We train them and raise them to do better, hopefully. In some cases, that's not always the situation, but unlike sociopaths who seem to enjoy witnessing others in pain, narcissists just enjoy getting what they want, i.e. government. They don't necessarily revel in the situations they produce, and they may not even notice how hurtful they are. In this case, I don't really believe that because when you're dealing with a person, they may not, and there's going to be different nuances when you're dealing with a human being as an individual in a personal relationship. But when you're dealing with a government is a structure. It's a body of power, right? And I'm not saying everyone that is working within that power structure is a narcissist or is even evil. But I do think that when you're talking about an elitist global mindset, there is definitely an outcome that they're reaching for, and they will use whatever tactics they feel necessary, regardless of who it hurts. They really are only focused on what they stand to gain. So when their immediate goal has been met, abusive behaviors may recede. Great example of that is when more and more people started getting the jab, right? They begin to kind of release some of the fear tactics, kind of drop them a little bit, because they made it appear that what they were pushing for was actually being obeyed. But they still also made it very clear that the groups of people who did not obey were actually creating a problem for those that did, which I don't know in any world where that makes sense, right? That's like telling your child, stop being so obedient to me, right? Or I should say, stop being so disobedient, because you're making it harder and harder for everyone else to be obedient. Now, the reason why that doesn't make sense is because when a person knows to do the right thing, they may be tempted to do the wrong thing, right? But in this situation, it's a lot different, because we're not talking about a behavior pattern. We're talking about an act, right, that we're told it's going to justify the means. And we've not been given any proof of that, right? And I don't want to pick on that one topic, but that's just something that is kind of like present. It's still kind of ongoing, even though it's been under the radar a little bit. And, they may have pretended like, they're great with the outcome they got, but they're really not. And until they need to do it again, they'll stay silent and they'll bring it back up when necessary. Okay, so I'm sorry. So number one, this is when I'm going to list the three. So number one is controlling behavior, which I already touched on, but I want you to just kind of get a sense of very specific things that controlling behavior can look like. So the narcissist will display controlling behaviors, and they will increasingly demand more. Variance, anyone? I mean, I'm just saying, right? While some controlling behaviors are subtle, all are persistent. I can think of some that are subtle. How about using the population that maybe acquiesced and obeyed your rules, whether they were actually beneficial or not, to be praised and rewarded, so that those that questioned even may not have been anti-jab or face diaper, but they just questioned the science behind it, right? And those people that questioned, even if they were wholeheartedly on board with all of this stuff, but they just had maybe some misgivings because there wasn't enough information for them, they were criticized, deplatformed, called anti-jab, and what have you. And the people that actually promoted this ideology were actually just normies. They weren't like government entities. So they were able to kind of create these little minions, if you will, to kind of carry on their bad message. And it's very subtle in that sometimes you may just be around people and, they put on the face diaper and they ask why you don't have one on, or they may act as if, something's wrong with you physically, you're ill, if you don't. So, little subtle things like that. Are you getting kind of like strange looks, if you're not following the majority? Well, one of the things that they do when it's not subtle, right? And all of these behaviors are persistent, by the way, because remember, the end game is to get you to do what I want. It is to control you. And I'm going to use everything in my arsenal to get you to do what I want. It says that a narcissist will lie, they will cheat, and withhold information to get their way repeatedly. Because for narcissists, control is equivalent to power. Think about that. Right? Here you have an entity that already has power, but it wants more and more and more because of whatever outcome, right? They've war gamed and saw that this is what we stand to gain. Therefore, everything's on the table. nothing's off the table. So that means that you and I end up being kind of cogs in the wheel, and every new thing that comes at us, right, is obviously told to us that it's for our benefit. When we question where is the benefit and also what is the risk, right, cost analysis, we're told to be quiet and just obey. So my issue is not that the narcissist, right, is doing it. It's the people who listen to the narcissist and they cater to that message and they spread that message and they become little, what's called flying monkeys. And if you've never heard that term, you should look it up. It's really interesting. And it is in frame with the narcissistic behavior. Another thing, number 2, self-focus. Narcissistic abusers are self-aggrandizing. I don't even have to say too many names, Fauci, but most of those people that you hear talking on TV, you know, when they say things like, you know, I am the science. So when you question, you know, science, you're questioning me, or when you question me, you're questioning the science or whatever. When you equivocate yourself, when you make yourself equal to something, right? And you're telling people they can't question it, what you're in essence doing is making yourself a God king. That's what you're doing, right? And then if people don't obey the God king, right, it's to the gallows, to the guillotine. So when we contribute to this by acting as if it has some type of merit or weight, and we don't even think to ask, why are we pushing a message or an ideology we've not really looked into, right? We're just kind of regurgitating the propaganda that's told to us without even seeing if it has any truth at its core. And I think, you know, as God's people, we're to be people of truth, right? That's supposed to be the one thing that separates us from everybody else, is that we want to know the truth and then we want to do the truth. But, you know, if we're allowing ourselves to be the flying monkeys, if you will, or the strong arm of the narcissistic government, then essentially we've lost our ability to actually critically think. And we're a victim, but then we also become the abuser, as I mentioned before. It says that they're not only self-aggrandizing, but they manipulate others into giving them attention by displaying a variety of antics that range from entertainment to violence. And sometimes this display of violence makes others awestruck, and other times they intimidate. Either way, narcissists want to be held up on a pedestal. So this makes me think about the different groups that have been used by the government. And yes, I said it, they were used by the government. When you think about Antifa, when you think about BLM, Black Lives Matter, when you think about even presently, you know, a lot of these anti-pro-life movement people, you know, I don't really see too many people that are on the positive side of these movements or groups burning down things, throwing Molotov cocktails, you know, in churches, scrawling graffiti with satanic signs, with, you know, while quipping, you know, my body, my choice. I don't see certain factions of people doing that. Am I saying that there have never been that? No. But in the news, you're not going to see a lot of Christian people pretending to have an abortion on the steps, you know, of a government building. Like, it's just not happening. So they will do everything they can, no matter how violent, no matter how egregious, to make sure they get their way. And the thing that I find interesting about this is that these are people who always claim to want truth, right? Narcissists, they're very good. They're play actors. They're very good at pretending that they only want what's best for everybody, right? They usually will pretend that they are peaceful, or they desire peace. And they usually also pretend to be very open-minded to all types of argument. They're open to hearing all sides. Nothing could be further from the truth, right? Question the government on any given topic that is presently a hot button issue and see what happens. Not only will you be blocked, deplatformed, happened to me. I was kicked off Facebook for good for posting something about Ukraine that they didn't care for because it didn't follow their narrative. If you say anything that is contrary to the agreed upon message, then you'll be shut down. There is no openness. There is no seeing your side, right? So this is aggrandizement in the only way that I can describe it. It is also, the displays of violence are also ways they use intimidation, because, if I can hurt you, if I can hurt your family, if I can destroy your business, then you might be less apt to say something contrary, right, to what I'm saying. And we saw this during the BLM riots. We saw it during, Antifa, and we're seeing it now. If I can strong arm you, you're going to be afraid. But let me just say this, for us who follow Christ, the scriptures make very clear, do not seek to save your life or you'll lose it, right? You're not supposed to seek to save your life because your life is hidden in Christ. My life is hidden in Christ. So if I'm speaking truth, I'm supposed to trust that God has me. God has my back. If I don't, then what I'm actually saying is I don't trust that God can protect me. And here's the truth of the matter. We're not here serving the Lord and walking around as if nothing bad is supposed to happen to us. That's fairy tale land. It's not even in scripture. If you're going to follow God, it's going to cost you something. And sometimes, yes, even your life. The question you have to ask yourself is, how much faith do you have in God? Do you have enough faith to claim to believe in God? But then when trouble comes and you lose everything, right? Even those that are dear to you, are you going to give up and give in because somebody destroys something of yours or even destroys you? Remember that everything we have and everything that we are is in Christ. You either believe that or you don't. And you'll always be clamoring to hold on to something, right? Because of fear and because of what you're being told you should believe, or because the majority pushes an ideology and you're isolated and left alone. Let me tell you something. Almost all the people in scripture you ever read about, the reason why we're so in awe of them is because we saw they risked everything to serve the God they believed in. Otherwise, they'd just be another, Shlomo. It wouldn't matter. But we can't read about them and think that we don't have to be them, especially in our present age. And so for the last one, gaslighting. Gaslighting is manipulation meant to disorient. So if you don't know what disorient means, remember when you were a little kid and maybe, you and your siblings, you and your friends would run around really fast in a circle and then stand there and become completely dizzy and would crack up laughing? That's what disorient. You can't make heads or tails of what's true or what isn't. You're confused. Okay? It's meant to disorient. This technique is employed to make another person question their reality. Wow. It is employed to make another person question their reality. So, if you were following any of the thousands of things going on in the past couple of years, you'll notice that what was told to you maybe, February changed in March. And then what was said in April changed in June. Right. And then whenever you would go, wait, I thought we were supposed to be doing this over here. Oh, no. Well, see, the only reason we told you to do that was because, and whatever lie they give. And then I thought that these things work the way you said. Well, we found out that after doing some tests, they're better than nothing. They don't really slow anything, but you really need to get this type. But we have a hard time getting that type. Well, just use anything. It's fine. Chocolate and wine have been found because of antioxidants to be really great for you. 5 months later, chocolate can kill you and wine will give you, liver disease. I mean, if you have to follow information that changes over and over and over again, that is not science, my friend. That is manipulation, right? Because some things are just true and they have to be observable. And there has to be some type of proof that we can follow. There has to be some measurements done where I can look at it and see A and B and C all connect. If A is going to X, Y, Z, it's disjointed. Therefore, I have the right to say, I'm not doing this because it doesn't make sense. And I also have the right to say, anyone telling me that I must do it, even if it doesn't make sense, is absolutely ridiculous. And I will not do that. So I'm going to end it there because everybody knows I could go on this rant forever, and I love talking about this stuff with you. I feel like these conversations are cathartic for me because I don't have a lot of people around me that are even interested in dialoguing about what's going on and finding solutions. And we're going to continue to kind of parse out how narcissistic abuse via our government is affecting us and how we're the victim in the relationship. And I don't know about you, but I want to get out of this relationship and be in one that's going to be beneficial to me. And I would like to share more about the one that we should be in relationship with, who we should be trusting, who isn't abusive, who is loving and kind and compassionate, and isn't seeking to use us for his own personal gain. And I will get to that as we go through some of the experiences we're having and what that looks like from a bibliocentric view. So with that, this is Ebby with Jambalaya Talks. Please join me next time. Please make sure to comment, like, whatever you want to say about this video. I'm not overly sensitive. I can handle dialogue. Please join me next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Jambalaya Podcast with me, your host, Ebby. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. You can find me on IG at Jambalaya_Talks, on Twitter at Jambalaya_Talks, on Facebook as Jambalaya Talks, that's all one word. And on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we upload new content. And don't forget to hit that like button. See you next time.